Welcome to a chapter a day. Stop assuming that what you want is on the way. Because what if the delay you think you're experiencing is not a delay at all? What if nothing in your life is actually late, blocked, or missing, but instead everything is responding to a single invisible instruction, your internal state? Most people believe manifestation has a waiting period, a gap between desire and arrival, a time delay they have to endure. But that belief alone may be the very thing keeping the result from appearing. Because here's the truth most people never question: you're not waiting for life to deliver your desire. You are calibrating into the version of you that can hold it without resistance. And that changes everything. In the next few hours, you will begin to see something uncomfortable but liberating. The so-called delay is not external, it is internal synchronization, a recalibration of identity, expectation, and subconscious safety. And once you understand this, you will never experience waiting the same way again. Because waiting is not passive. It is not empty space. It is training. It is formation. It is the mind learning how to stop rejecting what it asked for. So as you listen, don't just follow the ideas. Watch your reactions. Notice where you resist. Notice where you rush. Notice where you still believe it should already be here. Because those moments are the exact places your transformation begins. And now, let's go deeper than the idea of delay itself. Chapter 1. The lie of the manifestation. Delay. You have been taught something so quietly, so consistently, that you may have never questioned it at all. That what you want takes time, that between desire and arrival, there is a delay, a waiting period, a gap that must be endured. But what if that was never a law of reality? What if it was simply a belief you absorbed so often that it started to feel like truth? Because here is where everything begins to shift. What if nothing in your life is actually delayed? What if everything you are calling not yet is actually already in motion, already responding, already aligning, but filtered through a system that requires internal agreement before it can appear? Pause for a moment and think about that. Because most people don't realize they are not waiting for reality to change. They are waiting for themselves to stop resisting it. And that changes the entire structure of how you interpret your life. Let's slow this down. Think about something you once deeply wanted. Maybe it was a relationship, a financial shift, a version of yourself you could almost see, but never quite reach. Now notice how you told the story of that experience. I'm still waiting. It hasn't happened yet. It's taking too long. And without realizing it, those statements didn't just describe your experience. They shaped it. Because the mind does something subtle but powerful here. When you define something as delayed, you automatically place it outside of yourself. You create separation. And separation becomes experience. Now here's the part most people never consider. If your subconscious believes something is far away, it will continuously organize your behavior to match that distance. You hesitate, you doubt, you check, you wait for signs, you interpret neutrality as not yet. And slowly, without noticing it, you build an internal environment where the very thing you want is always slightly out of reach. Not because it is absent, but because it is being held at a distance by perception itself. And so the question becomes unavoidable. What if the delay is not happening to you? What if it is being maintained by you? Not consciously, not deliberately, but through a pattern so familiar that it feels like reality itself. Now listen carefully, because this is where the structure begins to break. There are people who eventually receive what they wanted after months, years, sometimes even decades. And when they look back, they often say something strange. It came when I stopped thinking about it. It came when I gave up. It came when I relaxed. But what actually changed in that moment? Did reality suddenly speed up? Or did their internal resistance finally dissolve enough for them to stop reinforcing separation? Pause here, because this is not just philosophy. This is the mechanism underneath experience itself. And so, we return to the idea that started all of this. The belief in delay. What if delay is not a waiting period imposed by life, but a calibration process occurring within you? A subtle adjustment of identity, expectation, emotional safety, and subconscious permission. Because think about it, if you were given something before your mind felt safe to hold it, you would likely reject it, or sabotage it, or lose it. So perhaps what you have been calling delay is actually a system ensuring stability before expansion, not punishment, not blockage, but alignment, preparation. And still, there is something unsettling here. Because if this is true, then waiting is not passive. It is not empty. It is not neutral. It is active internal construction. A reshaping of how you relate to having, to receiving, to being the version of you that no longer questions whether it is coming, because it is already being integrated. Now let's bring this closer. Think again about your own experiences. The moments where you said, "It's taking too long. I don't see it yet. Maybe it's not happening." And now, just for a second, observe those thoughts not as truth, but as signals. Signals of a deeper belief still active underneath everything, that it is separate from me. And if it is separate, it must take time to reach me. But what if separation was never real to begin with? What if the only thing creating the experience of distance is the belief that distance exists? And here is where everything begins to soften, because if there is no real separation, then there is no real delay. Only adjustment, only synchronization, only internal alignment unfolding at the exact speed your system allows it to stabilize. And you may not fully accept this yet. That's okay. You don't need to. But notice something important as you listen. Notice whether part of you resists the idea that nothing is delayed, because that resistance itself is part of the calibration. You're not being asked to force belief. You are being asked to observe structure, to see how meaning shapes timing, how expectation shapes experience, how identity shapes perceived distance, and now we arrive at a turning point. Because if delay is not real in the way you are taught to believe, then something else must be happening instead. Something quieter, something more intelligent, something constantly active beneath the surface of your waiting. And most people never look here long enough to understand it. They simply call it time passing. But it is not time passing. It is something else entirely. Something that explains why nothing ever truly arrives. Late. Only aligned. And so we end here for now, in this space of questioning. Not conclusion, not certainty, but opening. Because once you begin to doubt the reality of delay itself, you're no longer inside the old framework of waiting. You're standing at the edge of something far more precise. Something that has been shaping your entire experience without your awareness. And the question now is not when will it arrive, but something far more important. Something you will begin to understand in the next chapter. Because if delay is not what you think it is, then what is actually controlling the speed of your reality? You have now seen the illusion of waiting begin to dissolve. But behind every illusion, there is a mechanism maintaining it. And once you recognize the illusion of delay, you're ready to understand the force that makes it feel real in the first place. Chapter 2. Why your subconscious rejects instant reality. Now that you've begun to question the idea of delay itself, we have to go one layer deeper. Because even if you understand that delay is not a law, you may still notice something else happening inside you. A resistance, a hesitation, a subtle inner tension that appears the moment something good feels too close. And this is where most people get confused. They think they want instant manifestation. They think they want things to arrive immediately. But when life begins to move faster, when opportunities actually appear, when change starts to approach them without delay, something unexpected happens. They pull back, they hesitate, they second guess, they create distance again, and then they say, "It didn't work." But what actually happened was far more precise than that. Pause for a moment and feel this. Your conscious mind can desire instant change, but your subconscious mind is not designed for speed. It is designed for familiarity, for safety, for predictability. And anything unfamiliar, even if it is good, can register internally as unstable. So when reality begins to shift quickly, when something aligns faster than expected, your subconscious does not evaluate it as good news. It evaluates it as unfamiliar input. And unfamiliar input is treated as potential risk. This is where the friction begins. Not outside of you, inside of you. And that friction is what you experience as delay. But it is not delay in the external world. It is resistance in the internal system. A slowing down effect created by uncertainty. A buffering process in identity. A recalibration of what feels safe to accept. And now, if you look closely at your own experiences, you may start to recognize a pattern. A job opportunity appears, but you hesitate. A relationship shows interest, but you question it. A financial opening arrives, but you overthink it until the moment passes. And afterward, the mind says, "It wasn't meant for me." But the deeper truth is simpler. It felt too unfamiliar to hold. And here is where the subconscious reveals its primary rule. If something does not feel safe, it does not feel available. Say that slowly to yourself. If it does not feel safe, it does not feel available. Because availability is not just external. It is emotional, it is neurological, it is identity-based. And this is why instant reality often collapses under pressure for most people. Not because it is impossible, but because the system receiving it has not yet expanded enough to contain it. Think about it like this. If your inner world has been trained for waiting, for effort, for struggle, for gradual progress, then sudden change feels like instability, not relief. Even when it is something you asked for. Especially when it is something you asked for. And so the subconscious does something very subtle. It introduces hesitation. It generates doubt. It creates analysis where none is needed. It slows your decisions. It makes you revisit what you already felt clear about. And all of this creates the illusion of delay. But underneath it is something much simpler. A protection mechanism. A safety system trying to keep your identity consistent. Now here is where this becomes even more important. Because most people try to fix this by forcing positivity, by repeating affirmations, by trying to override doubt with mental effort. But the subconscious does not respond to force. It responds to familiarity, to repetition, to emotional safety, to identity reinforcement. So when something arrives too quickly internally and does not match what you are used to being, the system does not integrate it. It rejects it, not because it is wrong, but because it is unprocessed. And this rejection is rarely obvious. It doesn't feel like, "I don't want this." It feels like, "I should think about it more. I'm not sure yet. Maybe later." And in that space of hesitation, opportunity dissolves back into distance. But listen closely here. Because this is one of the most important realizations in the entire framework. You are not blocked from receiving instantly. You are conditioned to interpret unfamiliar speed as danger, and that interpretation slows everything down. And now you begin to see the deeper structure. It is not that life is slow, it is that safety determines speed. Say that again internally. Safety determines speed. Not desire, not logic, not intention. Safety. And so the real question is no longer, how do I manifest faster? It becomes, what in me feels unsafe about having it now? Because that is where the resistance lives. That is where the delay is constructed. That is where the system hesitates before allowing alignment to complete. And as you begin to observe this in yourself, something subtle happens. You stop seeing resistance as failure. You start seeing it as information, a signal pointing to where your internal world has not yet adjusted, a place where identity is still catching up with desire. And now, notice something carefully. Even as you understand this intellectually, there may still be a part of you that wants to ask, but why does it feel unsafe in the first place? And that question matters, because it leads us somewhere deeper than behavior, deeper than mindset, deeper than manifestation techniques. It leads us into the origin of the safety system itself. Because if your subconscious is protecting you from instant reality, then at some point, it must have learned that change equals risk. At some point, it must have been trained to associate unfamiliar outcomes with instability. At some point, safety became more important than expansion. And so now we arrive at the real threshold. Not the mechanics of manifestation, but the architecture of emotional safety itself. Because once you understand where this system comes from, you will no longer confuse resistance with truth. You will recognize it for what it is, a learned protection pattern operating beneath awareness. And this is where the next layer begins, because the moment you see that safety, not desire, is controlling speed, you are ready to explore the hidden structure that created that safety system in the first place. You now understand that the subconscious does not reject what you want. It rejects what feels unfamiliar to hold. But that still leaves the deeper question untouched. Because safety itself is not random. It is learned, it is conditioned, it has a history. And to understand why your mind slows reality down, you have to discover where that safety system was built in the first place. Chapter 3. The hidden mechanism behind waiting. Now we arrive at something most people have lived inside of, without ever questioning what it actually is. Waiting. It feels simple at first. You want something, and it is not here yet. So you wait. But the longer you stay inside that state, the more it begins to feel like something else entirely. Uncertainty, impatience, mental looping, emotional tension that rises and falls in waves, and eventually you stop seeing waiting as a neutral space, and you start seeing it as absence, as lack, as proof that something is missing. But what if that interpretation is completely wrong? Because here is where the perception begins to shift. What if waiting is not the absence of what you want, but the presence of something else happening underneath it? Something invisible, something active, something that most people are experiencing constantly, without ever recognizing it as a process. Let's slow this down, because in reality, waiting is not empty space. It is not inactivity. It is not nothing happening. Waiting is a state of internal adjustment, a recalibration process between identity, expectation, and emotional coherence. And this is why waiting feels so unstable for most people, because they interpret adjustment as absence. But adjustment is movement, even when nothing external appears to change. Pause here and notice something familiar. When you are waiting for something important, you rarely remain still internally. You check, you think about it, you replay scenarios, you imagine outcomes, you question timing, you scan for signs, You compare your situation to others, and sometimes you try to let go, only to find yourself pulled back in again. This cycle is not random. It is not meaningless. It is the system actively trying to stabilize a new internal state while still anchored to an old one. And that tension between the two is what you feel as waiting. Now listen closely, because this is where the misunderstanding deepens. Most people believe that if something has not arrived, nothing is happening. But internally, something is always happening. Beliefs are shifting. Emotional associations are reorganizing. Identity structures are adjusting to match or reject new possibilities. And all of that takes place beneath conscious awareness. So when you are waiting, you are not paused. You are in transition, even if it feels like stillness. Even if it feels like nothing is moving, something is reorganizing itself at a level you cannot see directly. Now think about the emotional cycles that often appear during waiting. The checking phase, where you repeatedly look for evidence. The doubt phase, where you question whether it will ever happen. The frustration phase, where impatience turns into emotional pressure. And the surrender phase, where you temporarily release control, only to cycle back again. These are not signs that something is wrong. They are signs that the system is actively trying to find coherence, trying to stabilize between expectation and identity, between desire and belief, between internal possibility and emotional safety. And this is where a key realization begins to surface. The discomfort of waiting is not caused by time, it is caused by inconsistency within the internal state. A mismatch between what you want and what your system is currently structured to hold. Now repeat this slowly to yourself. Waiting is not emptiness, it is adjustment. Waiting is not emptiness, it is adjustment. Waiting is not emptiness, it is adjustment. Because that single shift reframes everything. It removes the idea that nothing is happening and replaces it with the understanding that something is actively reorganizing beneath perception. But now, a deeper question begins to emerge. If waiting is adjustment, then what exactly is being adjusted? Is it circumstances? Is it timing? Is it external reality? Or is it something closer, something internal, something foundational to how you experience reality itself? Because if nothing external is truly separate from your internal state, then whatever is adjusting during waiting must be happening inside you first. And that leads us somewhere even more precise, somewhere more intimate, somewhere that explains why waiting feels personal, even when nothing outside of you seems to be changing. And this is where we begin to approach the hidden mechanism beneath the mechanism. Because once you see that waiting is not empty space, you can no longer unsee the question that follows. Not when will it happen, but something far more revealing. Something that pulls you closer to the core of how reality is structured from within you. You now understand that waiting is not absence, it is adjustment. But adjustment always implies something specific is being recalibrated beneath the surface. And once you recognize that waiting is an active process, not a passive one, the real question becomes unavoidable. If everything is adjusting during the wait, what part of you is actually being rewritten? Chapter 4. How Identity Creates Time Lag. Now we begin to approach something even more precise. Because up until this point, you may have still been thinking about delay as something external. Something happening out there, in time, in circumstances, in the world around you. But the deeper truth is far more personal than that. Because what you experience as time is often just identity unfolding at its own speed. Let that land for a moment. Identity determines how quickly reality is allowed to organize around you. Not desire, not intention, not effort, identity. And this is where everything becomes more intimate. Because identity is not what you say you are. It is what your system consistently believes it is safe for you to be. It is the unconscious structure that filters what you accept and what you subtly reject without even noticing. Pause here and think about your own life. Have you ever noticed that certain opportunities appear, but you don't fully step into them? Not because they weren't real, not because they weren't available, but because something inside you hesitated just long enough for them to pass. That hesitation is not random, it is identity in action. Let's make this clearer. Imagine someone who does not see themselves as lucky. They may consciously want good outcomes. They may even try to pursue opportunities. But when something unexpectedly positive arrives, their internal system hesitates. They question it, they overanalyze it, they assume it might not last, or they look for reasons it won't work. And in doing so, they unconsciously slow their own alignment with it. Not because they are sabotaging themselves intentionally, but because their identity does not fully include the experience of receiving easily. And so the experience feels delayed. But what is actually happening is much more precise. The system is filtering reality through identity before it becomes lived experience. And this is why two people can experience the same opportunity in completely different ways. One receives it immediately. The other delays it through doubt. Not because the opportunity is different, but because the identity receiving it is different. Now repeat this slowly inside yourself. You don't receive what you want. You receive what you match. You don't receive what you want. You receive what you match. You don't receive what you want. You receive what you match, because matching is not about effort. It is about coherence. Internal alignment between belief, emotion, expectation, and self-concept. And when that alignment is incomplete, reality feels slow. Not because it is slow, but because it is being filtered through hesitation, through inconsistency, through internal contradiction. Now think about moments in your life where something good almost happened, but didn't fully land. A conversation that faded, an opportunity that slipped away, a timing that felt off. And now consider this possibility. It wasn't that the moment failed. It was that identity could not fully stabilize around it yet. And this is where time lag appears, not as a force acting on you, but as a reflection of internal readiness, because identity does something very specific. It determines how quickly you accept what aligns with your desire, and how quickly you reject what does not feel familiar, even when it is good, especially when it is good. So the experience of delay is often just the space between exposure and acceptance, between opportunity and internal permission, between possibility and identity integration. And now everything begins to reorganize, because if identity is what determines speed, then time is no longer the controlling factor. Identity is. And this raises a question most people never stop long enough to ask. If identity is the real filter shaping reality, then is it fixed? Or can it shift? And if it can shift shift quickly enough to collapse what we experience as delay? Because if identity is the mechanism creating time lag, then changing identity would not just change outcomes, it would change the experience of time itself. And that possibility changes everything, because it suggests that what you have been calling waiting may not be waiting at all. It may simply be the space where identity has not yet fully caught up to desire. And now we arrive at a turning point, because if identity is the source of delay, then the next question is unavoidable. Can identity be changed instantly, or does identity itself require time to evolve? And the answer to that question determines whether delay is real, or whether it has always been an illusion of internal structure. You now see that time lag is not created by time at all, but by identity mismatch between who you are and what you're trying to receive. But if identity is the real mechanism behind delay, then the most important question emerges. Can the self that creates delay be rewritten in real time? Or does identity itself obey the same waiting process it creates? Chapter 5. Your relationship with waiting is the real problem. Now we come to something most people never stop long enough to notice. Not the fact that they are waiting, but how they are waiting. Because there is a difference, a very important difference. And that difference is where most of the internal conflict actually begins. At first, waiting feels neutral, a simple gap between desire and arrival. But over time, that gap begins to fill with something else. Emotion, tension, interpretation, expectation. And slowly, the experience of waiting stops being about time and becomes about relationship. Your relationship with the state of waiting itself. Now pause here for a moment, because this is subtle but powerful. You are not only responding to what you want, you are responding to how you feel while you do not have it yet. And that emotional response becomes part of the system shaping what happens next. Let's go deeper. When you are in a waiting phase, your mind does something very specific. It starts monitoring, it checks for signs, it scans for change, it evaluates silence, and it tries to predict timing based on incomplete information. But underneath all of that mental activity is something more important: emotion. Because emotion is what determines coherence, not logic, not intention, emotion. And this is where resistance begins to form. Because waiting by itself is not the issue. The emotional resistance to waiting is the issue. The frustration, the impatience, the subtle anxiety that something is wrong because something has not yet arrived. And when that emotional resistance is present, it creates contradiction inside the system. You're asking for something, but emotionally signaling that its absence is unacceptable. You are desiring expansion, but emotionally reinforcing lack. You are intending alignment, but internally broadcasting urgency. And this contradiction is what disrupts coherence. Not the waiting itself, but the tension you generate around it. Now think about a simple example. A pause period in your life. A moment where nothing seems to be changing externally. No obvious progress, no visible movement. And instead of allowing that space to simply exist, your mind begins to fill it with worry, with analysis, with pressure, with imagined outcomes, with emotional discomfort that grows the longer the silence continues. And now notice what that actually does. It does not speed anything up. It does not create clarity. It creates noise, internal noise that disrupts alignment. Because coherence requires stillness. Not forced stillness, not controlled stillness, but emotional neutrality within the waiting state. And this is where most people unknowingly sabotage their own timing. Not through action, but through emotional resistance to inaction. Now repeat this slowly. Waiting reveals identity, not absence. Waiting reveals identity, not absence. Waiting reveals identity, not absence. Because what you become aware of during waiting is not what is missing outside of you, but what is active inside of you. Impatience, trust, doubt, attachment, surrender, resistance, control. Waiting does not create these states, it exposes them. And this is why waiting feels so personal, because it is not about time passing. It is about you becoming visible to yourself in the absence of external distraction. Now here is where the psychological twist appears, because most people assume waiting is the problem, or that delay is the problem, or that circumstances are the problem. But what if none of that is true? What if waiting is not the problem at all? but a feedback mechanism. A mirror, a signal, a reflection of internal coherence or incoherence. Because if your emotional state remains stable during waiting, you experience flow, continuity, quiet progression that feels natural even if nothing dramatic is happening. But if your emotional state becomes unstable, waiting becomes painful, heavy, distorted, slow. Not because reality changed, but because feedback is now reflecting internal resistance. And now, everything begins to shift again, because waiting is no longer something happening to you. It is something happening through you. A diagnostic space where your internal alignment becomes visible. And this leads us to a deeper realization. If waiting is feedback, then it is not meaningless. It is informative. It is structured. It is revealing something essential about your internal state of coherence. And once you see this clearly, you can no longer interpret waiting as failure, only as information, only as reflection, only as communication from the system itself. And now the question changes shape. Because if waiting is feedback, then what exactly is it reflecting back to you? And more importantly, what would it mean if you could read that feedback correctly? You now understand that your emotional relationship with waiting creates either coherence or contradiction, and that this state is constantly reflected back to you as experience. But if waiting is feedback rather than failure, then the next question becomes unavoidable. What is the system actually trying to teach you through that feedback? And how does that feedback reshape what you believe is possible? Chapter 6. The calibration period. Nobody understands. Now we arrive at a stage where most people completely misinterpret what is happening in their lives. Because up until now, you may still be carrying a subtle assumption. That delay means something is wrong. That waiting means something is missing. That silence means something is not working. But what if none of that is accurate? What if there is a phase in the process that was never meant to be interpreted as lack, but instead as preparation? Let's slow this down. Because this stage is rarely understood in real time. It is only understood in hindsight. And even then, most people describe it the same way. It happened when I stopped trying. It came when I gave up. It appeared when I finally relaxed. But the deeper question is not when it arrived. The deeper question is what changed internally right before it did. And this is where calibration enters. Not as a concept, but as a process already active beneath your awareness. Calibration is not delay. It is not blockage. It is not absence. Calibration is adjustment of internal stability so that what you desire does not destabilize your identity when it arrives. Pause here for a moment. Because this changes the entire meaning of waiting. Most people assume that once something is manifested, the work is done. But the system does not operate that way. Because receiving is not just about attracting, it is about sustaining, holding, integrating. And if your internal structure is not stable enough to hold what you desire, the experience will feel overwhelming, unfamiliar, or even temporary. So the system adjusts, not to deny you, but to prepare you. Think about moments in life where something almost arrived, but didn't fully stabilize. An opportunity that came too early emotionally. A relationship that felt intense but unstable. A financial shift that didn't last because it didn't feel grounded inside you yet. And in most cases, the mind interprets this as failure. But calibration interprets it as timing mismatch between identity and experience. Now here is the deeper layer. There are moments when things finally arrive after a period of surrender. And people assume surrender made it happen. But surrender did something more precise than that. It removed resistance long enough for calibration to complete, because resistance is noise in the system. and noise prevents alignment from stabilizing. So when resistance softens, clarity increases, coherence strengthens, and internal structure finally becomes able to support what was already in motion. And this is where a powerful shift happens, because what you thought was waiting for it to come was actually your system learning how to stop destabilizing it internally. Now repeat this slowly. Calibration is preparation, not punishment. Calibration is preparation, not punishment. Calibration is preparation, not punishment. Because punishment implies delay without purpose. But calibration implies structure with intention. One is random, the other is intelligent adjustment. And now something very important becomes visible. During calibration, nothing is truly paused. Everything is being reorganized beneath perception. Beliefs are being softened. Emotional reactions are being recalibrated. Identity boundaries are being expanded. And subconscious associations are being rewritten. But because none of this is visible externally, it is misinterpreted as nothing happening. When in reality, everything is happening at a level deeper than observation. And this is why calibration often feels strange. You may feel detached. You may feel uncertain. You may feel like you are in between versions of yourself. Not fully the old self, not yet the new one. But this in-between state is not instability. It is restructuring. Now think about this carefully. If your identity is being recalibrated, then what is it being calibrated toward? What is the system aligning you with? What version of reality requires this level of internal adjustment before it can fully stabilize? Because calibration always has direction. It is not random refinement. It is targeted alignment. And this leads to a subtle but powerful realization. You're not being prepared for getting something. You are being prepared for becoming someone. Someone who does not interpret desire as distance. Someone who does not interpret silence as absence. Someone who does not collapse emotionally when reality is still forming. And now everything begins to reframe again. Because calibration is not just about receiving outcomes. It is about stabilizing identity so outcomes no longer feel external. And this is where the mind begins to quiet. Because the struggle was never about delay, it was about readiness. And yet, even here, a deeper question begins to emerge. If calibration is preparing you, if identity is being adjusted, if emotional coherence is being stabilized, then what exactly is the system preparing you for, not just externally, but internally? What version of experience requires this level of refinement before it can fully enter your life? And that question opens the next layer. Because once you understand preparation, you begin to understand purpose. You now understand that what looked like delay was actually calibration, a structured internal adjustment, preparing you for stability, not withholding outcomes from you. But calibration always implies direction. So the next question becomes unavoidable. If you are being prepared through this process, what exactly are you being prepared to receive? And who must you become to hold it without resistance? Chapter 7. Breaking the emotional dependency on external proof. Now we reach a very subtle turning point in the entire process. Because up until now, you may still be carrying something quietly in the background of your attention. A habit, a reflex, a need that feels so normal, you may not even recognize it as a pattern. The need for proof, the need to see something before you believe it is working. The need to feel movement before you trust it is happening. The need for external confirmation before internal certainty can stabilize. And at first, this seems reasonable, even logical, even responsible. But underneath it, something more subtle is taking place. Because every time you require proof, you reinforce distance. You reinforce separation between you and what you want. You reinforce the idea that reality is still out there, waiting to respond to you. Pause here for a moment, because this is where the loop begins. You want something, you think about it, you feel aligned with it for a moment. Then almost immediately, a question appears: is it working yet? And that question changes everything, because the moment you ask for proof, you exit the state of alignment, and you enter the state of evaluation. And evaluation is not creation. Evaluation is comparison, measurement, distance awareness. And now the system shifts. Instead of holding the feeling of already being in alignment, you begin scanning reality for evidence that confirms it. And when you don't see it quickly enough, doubt begins to rise. So you try again, you visualize again, you affirm again, you reset your focus again. But underneath all of it, the same dependency remains active. Show me first, then I will believe. And this creates something very important to understand: a continuous postponement loop. Not because reality is delaying you, but because attention is being repeatedly pulled out of embodiment and into observation. Now think about a simple example. You decide to focus on a desire. For a moment, you feel connected to it. Then shortly after, you check. You look for signs, you analyze small details, you search for changes, and in doing so, you interrupt the very state that would allow changes to stabilize. Because the state that creates alignment is not the same state that looks for alignment. One is being, the other is checking. And this is where the tension builds. Because checking feels like action, but energetically it is interruption, a reset of coherence, a return to lack-based observation. And so the cycle repeats. Desire, alignment, checking, doubt, reset, waiting. But now something becomes clear. This loop is not caused by lack of progress. It is caused by dependence on external confirmation. Now repeat this slowly. Proof is the last thing that arrives. Proof is the last thing that arrives. Proof is the last thing that arrives. Because proof is not the cause of manifestation, it is the result of sustained internal coherence long enough for external reality to reflect it back. But when proof becomes a requirement, you delay the very state that produces it. And here is the deeper layer most people never see. The need for proof is actually a signal. Not that something is missing externally, but that certainty has not yet stabilized internally. Because if you were already certain, you would not need to check. You would not need to scan. You would not need to constantly reevaluate whether it is working. You would simply remain in the state that assumes coherence is already unfolding. And so the real shift is not about ignoring reality. It is about no longer outsourcing emotional stability to it. Now imagine what happens when this dependency begins to weaken. When you stop checking so often. When you stop needing signs every few moments. When you stop measuring progress through external signals. Something subtle begins to happen. Your internal state stabilizes, and stability changes the frequency of what you experience. Because reality does not respond to urgency. It responds to consistency, and now we reach a delicate point. Because most people assume that removing the need for proof means doing nothing. But it is not nothing. It is something far more precise. It is maintaining internal coherence without interruption long enough for external reflection to catch up. And now the question begins to surface naturally. If proof is not something you rely on, but something that eventually appears, then what happens when you no longer need it at all? What happens when your internal state no longer depends on external confirmation to remain stable? What begins to change when validation is no longer the source of certainty? And this is where the structure begins to shift again. Because once proof is no longer needed, something else becomes possible. Something deeper than patience. something more stable than waiting, something that no longer operates on the same timeline at all. You now understand that the need for external proof creates a loop of postponement that interrupts internal coherence, and that proof is not the beginning of manifestation, but the final reflection of it. But if proof is no longer the anchor, then what holds your experience together instead? And what begins to happen when you stop waiting for reality to confirm you? Chapter 8. Reprogramming the mind through repetition and visualization. Now we begin to work directly with the mechanism underneath everything you have explored so far. Because up until this point, you have been observing delay, waiting, resistance, proof-seeking, and identity mismatch as separate ideas. But now, we bring those threads into one central process. Reprogramming, not as effort, not as forcing belief, but as repetition shaping identity from the inside out. And this is where visualization is often misunderstood. Most people treat visualization as imagination, as fantasy, as a temporary escape into a version of reality that feels good but isn't real yet. But that is not what is actually happening at the deeper level. Because visualization is not about pretending, it is about rehearsal. Identity rehearsal. Pause here for a moment, because this distinction is critical. When you visualize from a state of lack, you're observing a desired future. But when you visualize consistently from repetition, you're training the mind to accept a version of you as familiar. And familiarity is what determines acceptance. Not logic, not effort, familiarity. Now think about this carefully. Your mind does not fully adopt what is true in theory. It adopts what is experienced repeatedly, internally or externally. And once something is repeated enough times, it begins to feel normal. And what feels normal becomes identity. Now repeat this slowly. The mind accepts what it repeatedly experiences internally. The mind accepts what it repeatedly experiences internally. The mind accepts what it repeatedly experiences internally. Because repetition is not just a technique, it is the foundation of identity formation. And this is where visualization becomes powerful in a different way. Not because it creates instant change, but because it slowly reduces internal resistance to a new version of reality. Let's slow this down. When you mentally live an outcome, when you repeatedly imagine yourself already inside it, you begin to soften the emotional shock of unfamiliarity. You reduce the friction between who you are now and who you are becoming. And that reduction of friction is what changes everything. Because resistance is what creates delay, not time. Resistance. Now think about someone who repeatedly visualizes themselves confident in a specific situation. At first, it feels distant, unreal, even slightly uncomfortable. But over time, something shifts. The emotional charge decreases, the scenario feels less foreign, and eventually it stops feeling like imagination and starts feeling like recognition. And that moment is important, because recognition is the bridge between identity and experience. Now notice something subtle. This process does not force reality to change. It changes the internal conditions that determine what reality is allowed to stabilize around you. And this is where repetition becomes essential. Because one visualization is not enough to rewire identity. But repeated exposure to the same internal experience creates familiarity loops. And familiarity becomes acceptance. And acceptance is what collapses internal resistance. Now imagine this applied across days, weeks, months, not as obsession, not as effort, but as quiet repetition. Returning again and again to the same internal state until it no longer feels like something you're trying to reach, but something you are already aligned with internally. And this is where the transformation becomes subtle. because nothing dramatic may appear externally at first. But internally, the structure is changing. Beliefs are softening. Emotional responses are recalibrating. Identity boundaries are expanding. And resistance begins to dissolve in layers. Now pause here, because there is an important shift happening in understanding. You are no longer trying to attract something. You are becoming someone who no longer rejects it internally. And that changes the entire dynamic of manifestation. Because rejection is what maintains distance, and acceptance is what collapses it. Now think about the loop you have seen throughout this entire system. Resistance creates delay. Delay reinforces doubt. Doubt increases checking. Checking resets coherence, and the cycle continues. But repetition and visualization interrupt that loop at the identity level. They stabilize familiarity, and familiarity replaces resistance. And when resistance decreases, time lag begins to dissolve. Not because reality changed, but because internal friction has been removed. Now repeat this slowly. The mind accepts what it repeatedly experiences internally. The mind accepts what it repeatedly experiences internally. The mind accepts what it repeatedly experiences internally. Because this is the mechanism beneath all change described in this framework. Not force, not struggle, not urgency, but repetition shaping identity until resistance is no longer necessary. And now we arrive at the edge of something important. Because if repetition can reshape identity, and identity determines delay, then repetition is not just a tool. It is a structural force shaping the speed of experience itself. And that leads to a deeper question. Because if you can repeatedly become something internally, then at what point does repetition stop being practice and start becoming who you are? You now understand that visualization is not wishful thinking. It is identity rehearsal, and repetition is what slowly dissolves resistance until the mind no longer distinguishes between internal experience and lived reality. But this raises a deeper question. What happens when repetition no longer feels like something you are doing, and instead becomes the identity you are living from? Chapter 9. The identity shift that collapses time. Now we arrive at something most people only recognize after the fact, not during the process, but after it has already happened. They look back and say things like, "I don't know when it changed. It just happened suddenly. It felt like it came out of nowhere." But nothing ever truly arrives out of nowhere. What they are actually describing is something far more precise. A shift in identity so complete that time was no longer required to bridge the gap between desire and experience. Pause here for a moment, because this idea may feel subtle at first, but it is one of the most important turning points in the entire structure. Time collapse does not mean reality moves faster. It means the separation between who you are and what you want stops being experienced as distance. And when distance disappears, time loses its function. Let that settle. Because time, as you experience it internally, is not just clocks or calendars, it is the perceived gap between states of being, between current identity and desired identity, between what is and what is becoming. And when that gap exists, time feels long, stretching, delayed, incomplete. But when that gap dissolves, time no longer has anything to measure. Now think about moments in life where something finally arrived. Not because you forced it, not because you chased it harder, but because something inside you shifted first. And after that shift, the outcome appeared naturally, effortlessly, almost as if it had been waiting for you to stop resisting it internally. And this is where the pattern becomes clear. People often receive what they stopped chasing, not because pursuit was blocking it physically, but because pursuit was reinforcing separation internally. Because chasing says, "It is not here yet. It is outside of me. I must go toward it." And that internal message maintains distance. It maintains time. It maintains delay. But when chasing stops, something subtle changes. The internal signal stabilizes. The identity no longer defines itself through lack or pursuit. And the system no longer has to organize reality around distance. And this is where collapse begins. Not suddenly, but precisely, quietly, structurally. Now repeat this slowly. When identity shifts, time dissolves. When identity shifts, time dissolves. When identity shifts, time dissolves. Because identity is what creates the experience of continuity between where you are and where you think you need to go. And when that continuity is interrupted by alignment, time is no longer experienced as movement. It is experienced as arrival. Now consider something important. There are moments where people give up trying to force outcomes. They stop checking. They stop controlling. They stop emotionally pushing against reality. And in that release, something unexpected happens. The very thing they were trying to create begins to appear. But not because effort stopped, because identity stabilized without tension. And this is the paradox most people miss. It was never effort that created delay. It was identity tension maintaining separation from the outcome. Now everything begins to simplify, because if identity is aligned, there is no internal contradiction to resolve, no emotional distance to bridge, no resistance to dissolve, and without resistance, time has nothing to stretch against. Now imagine what this means at a deeper level. If identity can shift, and if that shift can remove perceived distance, then time itself is not fixed. It is responsive. It bends around internal coherence. And this is where the structure becomes almost unrecognizable compared to how most people were taught to think about reality. Because now, time is no longer the driver of experience. Identity is. And now we reach a moment of reflection. Because if identity shift collapses time, then what does life feel like when time is no longer the medium through which change is measured? What happens when there is no longer a sense of waiting for it to happen? What remains when becoming and having are no longer separated? And this is where the mind begins to stretch beyond familiar structure, because everything up to this point has been about alignment within time. But now we begin to question something deeper, the framework itself, the idea of sequence, the idea of waiting, the idea of arrival. And as that structure begins to loosen, a new possibility begins to emerge, one that does not operate on timing at all, one that does not rely on delay or movement or process, something beyond time itself. You now understand that when identity shifts, time collapses, and what once felt like waiting was actually separation between states of being dissolving in real time. But this leads to the final and most expansive question of all. If time is no longer the structure holding experience together, what kind of reality exists beyond it? Chapter 10. Living Beyond Delay. The final expansion of conscious creation. Now we arrive at the final expansion. And at this point, something important has already begun to happen within you, even if you cannot fully name it yet. The idea of waiting has started to loosen, not as a concept you reject, but as a structure you no longer fully inhabit in the same way. Because once you see how delay is formed, how identity creates distance, how resistance shapes timing, how calibration reorganizes experience, you begin to notice something else underneath it all, a different way of interpreting reality entirely. And it starts with a simple reframing. What if reality is not something that happens to you over time, but something that responds through you in real time, not delayed? not postponed, not arriving later, but continuously reflecting your internal state back to you as experience. Pause here for a moment, because this is where the entire framework completes its turn. Most people live as if life is a sequence. Cause, then effect. Action, then outcome. Desire, then waiting, then arrival. But what if that sequence was only how experience appears from inside a shifting identity? What if, underneath it, there is no delay at all? Only immediate reflection, because consciousness does not wait. It expresses, it mirrors, it responds. And what you call external reality may simply be the visible layer of that response. Now think about your own life again. Every emotional shift, every moment of clarity or confusion, every time your internal state changed, something in your external experience began to subtly align with it, not always instantly visible, but always structurally consistent over time. And this is where the deeper realization forms. Life is not a waiting line. It is a continuous reflection, a living mirror adjusting itself to the state of awareness, observing it. And once you begin to see reality this way, the entire concept of delay becomes less meaningful, because delay implies separation. It implies distance between intention and expression. But reflection does not require distance. It requires only coherence. Now repeat this slowly. You are not waiting. You are witnessing. Because witnessing does not imply lack. It does not imply pursuit. It does not imply arrival. It simply implies awareness of unfolding experience. And in that state of witnessing, the emotional tension around timing begins to dissolve. Because nothing is being withheld. Nothing is being postponed. Nothing is on its way in the way you once believed. Everything is already in motion as reflection. And now the question that once felt urgent, when will it happen, begins to lose its structure entirely. Because it assumes distance where reflection exists. It assumes delay where responsiveness is constant. It assumes separation where there is only interaction. And so something subtle begins to shift. You stop interpreting silence as absence. You stop interpreting stillness as blockage. You stop interpreting timing as control outside of you. And instead, you begin to recognize something quieter, more stable, more immediate. That life is responding not to your future, but to your current state of being. And now everything comes into alignment as a single understanding. Not fragmented steps, not stages of delay, but one continuous principle. Consciousness expresses and reality reflects. And from here, even manifestation begins to lose its old meaning, because it no longer feels like bringing something in from somewhere else. It feels like recognizing what is already forming through you. And so the journey you thought was about waiting reveals itself as something else entirely. Not a path toward arrival, but an unfolding awareness of constant reflection. Now, as this understanding settles, there is a final expansion that cannot be fully contained in words. Because it is not a conclusion, it is a shift in perspective itself. If reality is always reflecting consciousness, and consciousness is always present, then what exactly was ever delayed in the first place? And if nothing was ever delayed, then what does it mean to live in a state where nothing is missing, nothing is waiting, and nothing is coming later? Because at that point, the idea of future arrival begins to dissolve completely, and something else begins to emerge in its place. A way of being that is no longer organized around time, but around awareness itself. And so we end here, not with an answer, but with a widening space. A question that does not demand resolution, but invites direct recognition. If you are not waiting, and nothing is arriving, and everything is already reflecting you in real time, then what exactly are you now living inside of? And as that question opens, the structure of the entire experience quietly transforms. Not into conclusion, but into presence. So now you see it. There was never a delay. There was never a gap between you and what you desire. Only calibration, only alignment, only the gradual or sometimes sudden shift of identity into a state where your desire no longer feels foreign, distant, or impossible. Because what you once called waiting was never empty space. It was your subconscious learning how to hold what you asked for without resistance. It was your emotional system dissolving old associations with lack, doubt, and separation. And now, that changes how you move through life. You no longer interpret silence as absence. You no longer interpret timing as rejection. You no longer interpret stillness as failure. Instead, you begin to recognize something deeper. Every moment is feedback. Every pause is information. Every experience is calibration toward coherence with a new version of you. And the moment you stop demanding external proof before internal peace, something remarkable happens. The delay collapses. Not because reality sped up, but because you stopped separating from it. So from this point forward, your only real work is simple. Notice your internal state. Reclaim your emotional stability. Return again and again to the version of you that already holds what you desire, and let everything else organize itself, because it always has. Now here is your challenge. For the next 7 days, stop asking when it will arrive. Instead, ask only, who am I being while I wait? And watch what begins to shift, when waiting is no longer waiting at all.